Well, I think it is 2 o'clock, so it's good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. I take it we're all here. I've only got one apology at the moment, and that is, I think, is the Chief Executive, Mrs. Anwen Morgan. Is there are there any other apologies?
Councillor Margaret Roberts, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Margaret Roberts. So with that, I think we'll move straight in. And I think the first thing I need is, do we have any declarations of interest? I can't see any hands up. I would take that is all right. So I think then it's the case really of moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting. I think if we just go through those by the pages. Page 1. Please shout out if there is anything. I can't always see all the hands there, but and then we go on to page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. I can see a hand. I've got Dilwyn on page 9.
Thank you, Chair. Back to my questions about the last item on page 10, external audit programme. This originally showed that the work on the external audit of the accounts would be completed in September. As in the past, we've tended to publish the accounts in September. Have we had dispensation for an extension? And how has this come about, please?
Who can I ask to respond to that?
I'll answer, Mr. Chair, Mark here.
Thank you.
Yeah, the deadline for completion of the accounts has been extended to the end of November, in line with what was agreed last year. There have been, I think, a few resource issues on the side of Wales Audit to complete all the accounts that across the whole region, which has slowed things down slightly. I'm sure if Alan will confirm that or not. But the plan now is that the accounts will come back to the Audit Committee on the 20th of October, along with the auditor's opinion and ISA 260 report. And then we'll go on to the full council. I think later that month is the intention of the time before the end of October. We have been told that Wales Audit Office have completed, or we are planning to complete the audit of some of the authorities by the end of September, some by the end of October, and some by the end of November. So we're sort of in the middle of the timetable that the Wales Audit Office are planning to complete. So to answer your question, yeah, we still comply with the law because the Welsh Government have given this extension again to the 30th of November.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. I think that relays any fear that you have, Dilwyn. I think that it has been.
I'm very sorry, Peter. I heard none of that. I'm trying to figure out what on earth I've got wrong on my screen.
You can hear me now, though.
I can hear Peter. I couldn't hear Mark, I'm afraid.
Could everybody else hear me?
I think that you gave a very concise answer. Dilwyn, to save going through it again, could you take it that I did listen to Mark intensely, and I was well satisfied that we are meeting all the requirements. There have been extensions, and that it will be complied with in the time that it's been allowed. Would you allow me to do that?
Of course I will. Thank you very much. I'm trying to see what's the matter with my iPad. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. So I think that that really concludes. We've got to page 10 and page 11. I don't think there was any issues to be reported back on anyhow. So I think that it was a straightforward. I think I really need now a proposer to accept these minutes as being correct, and a seconder. Can I have a proposer? I can't see anybody's hand. I think you have to.
Gwilym proposing them.
Oh, thank you, Gwilym. Thank you. And I need a seconder. Have I got
John Griffiths?
Oh, John Griffiths. Thank you very much indeed. I'll just go around quickly then. It's Dylan Rees.
Yes, approve.
Alan Roberts.
Derbyn.
Accept.
Richard Griffiths.
Derbyn.
Accept.
Jeff Evans. Jeff Evans. Perhaps he's. I'll leave that for a second. Perhaps he's not here. I can't see. And Dilwyn, can you hear me, Dilwyn Evans?
Yes, I can hear you. I accept. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that's that. Thank you very much indeed. We can now move on now to the third item, and I think is it Miss Lynn Ball? She's present? Is she? She's.
Yes, Councillor Rogers.
I think you're going to do three. What? Three of them, are you? These next reports.
Yes, I am.
1, 2, 3. All right.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Rogers. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you very much. Yes, the annual report on the CIRO regarding the Council's arrangements in relation to information management. The period of the report is from April 2020 to end of March 21. And as you're aware from last year, we've changed the process here and we've tried to cut down on the narrative, and we include most of the information now in the appendices. I'll go through some of the main parts of the appendices. So beginning with Appendix 1, this deals with regulators in this area. So to begin with the Investigatory Powers Commissioners, the IPCO, and we've had an audit from the regulators here, these regulators during the period of the report, and the result was a positive one. They were happy with the systems and processes that the council have in place, and there were no steps to be implemented as a result of the work. The second regulator is the Information Commissioner. There were 2 complaints that had been made to the Commissioner by the public during this period, and both were rejected by the Commissioner. But there was also one appeal against the decision of the Council during that period, and that appeal was successful against the Council. The third Commissioner is the Surveillance Camera Commissioner. So the Surveillance Commissioner here, there was no contact during the period of the report with the Commissioner. But you'll see from the report, the council did a lot of work in this area because that we did recognise weaknesses in our information and in our processes. So to begin with, we did an audit of these systems and the staff that implement and supervise the systems. We developed a pack of resources for the staff who work in this area and those responsible for those staff. And the pack of resources is available on the council intranet. And that, of course, is updated as needed. And also, we've arranged and conducted training for all staff who are responsible for this area. So all that has happened during the reporting period. The only thing I would draw attention to the committee to is that there are historical gaps in the paperwork that needs to be justified with some of these systems. What we did was to recognise which ones were the most risky, and following that process, about half of the systems have had an impact assessment, so things are now in place. There was a programme to finish this work, but unfortunately the individual in IT who was responsible for this work has left the council, so there is a gap there with the resource at the moment, and when that gap has been filled, we'll move on to complete the 10 that are left over with this system with the DPIA, and that's on the work list for the year to come. And just draw your attention to Appendix 2. Appendix 2 talks about data breaches here. There were 2 serious enough to report to the ICO under the statutory requirements during the period, and both have been resolved by now. With the first one, there were no steps from the Commissioner, but there was a need for the council to pay compensation to the individual. With the second one, there were recommendations that came back to the council, and this was a data breach to do with cyber incidents. So there's a work programme which has been developed in this area, and the work programme there, as it happens, was supposed to be for the SMT yesterday for approval, and it received adoption yesterday, and it will now report quarterly on progress to the Pennaethiad meeting, the heads of service, the directors. Appendix 3, requests for internal reviews. The number, information, freedom of information. The number are lower than usual, and maybe that's just because of COVID. But there are 2 things to report to the committee specifically, and 2 things asked to us to do from the panel committee last year. The first of all was that we put more information in the report to you about the categories of applicants and the requests, and you'll see that's attached to Appendix 3 of the report. So you have the type of breakdown there of where the applications are coming in. And then the second thing asked by the committee last year was for us to re-look at the council publication scheme, the statutory one, to see if we could publish more information under the principle that that would lead to less requests for information. So that work has happened, and there's an explanation of that in Appendix 8, and paragraph 5 of Appendix 8 explains the outcomes of that work that was done during the period. Appendix 4, complaints to the council itself to do with protecting personal data of individuals. 4 received during the reporting period, 4 investigated, and all complaints rejected. Appendix 5 talks about subject access requests to do with people themselves, so personal data for themselves, 25 applications there. And as we usually report on this issue, subject access requests, the responses are sometimes late. 78% of responses sent within the statutory period of a month. And the reasons for that are the same reasons as we report annually. They were complicated, they were long applications, and they usually are to do with social services and files, historical files going back years, and there's lots of information contained in them to do with other individuals, and significant redaction work is needed, and each line has to be read in detail, and every piece of paper or digital file has to be gone through in detail. So it does take time, and the service has put more resources into this and have developed a methodology already. We have put that training in place, but I don't foresee we're going to do much more to improve those response times in this area. Appendix 6, then, I'm raising with the committee once again 2 elements of the former work plan. This work plan is already closed now since 2 years, but there are 2 elements of work for the learning service that haven't been completed. The committee has encouraged them to do this previously, but it still hasn't happened because of other priorities. So I'm just raising that with you again. And that is in the recommendations at the end of the report as well. And then the final appendix 7, information governance training. There's a description there, the summary of the training that has happened during the period. We've given training in many areas, generic with lots of staff, and then specific training in areas where it was required. We as officers have been down to the nitty-gritty here, not just the summary you see, and we are very happy that there are more than 90% of our staff that we were targeting have now had the training during the period, and during the next period we'll try and find a way to encourage the other people who haven't yet completed the training. So just looking at the CIRO statement, this starts on the bottom of the first page. So the summary is that the processes, documents and training are all in place to give assurance to the committee that we are aware of the risks that faces, and that we are taking and have taken the necessary mitigation steps, and that are reasonable to manage the risks. But there are 2 caveats, of course, which I've mentioned already. One is the work that needs to be done from the learning service, and the other is the impact assessments in the camera surveillance area, which haven't been completed. And the priorities for the year to come will be to help the services with specific cases. There's a lot of innovative work which is happening already, I think, to do with COVID, obviously, test, track and trace and things like that. We've all been working regionally and nationally in areas to do with COVID. So foresee that will take a lot of time in the year to come. Training, of course, the usual training, but also a specific pack of training for the heads. So we are developing the module now, and to coincide with that, some kind of assurance system from the Penaethiad. We need to develop that requirement and give training on it so that both can work together. There is an update to some documents to come during the period, and then the work with the CCTV and the impact assessments. So I'll turn to the recommendations. In the report itself, there are 4 recommendation. So first of all, that you accept the statement as I've just set it out, and secondly and thirdly, to encourage the learning service to finish the 2 pieces of work that haven't been finished as of yet. And the final one is that the future reports to this committee are also going to include an assurance statements from heads of service and as information asset owners. This requirement is part of the job description of each of the senior officers, and what I want to do is develop that to give more assurance to the committee and to myself as CIRO about the work that they're doing in the different services. So that's the report, and of course I'm happy to accept any questions by the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Lynn. That was very, very good and very, very explanatory. I have one hand up. I've got Dilwyn first.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, in the conclusion, reaching the expression that arrangements are good, is there anything sort of practicable that can be done so that you come up next year maybe with very good or excellent? And when you do your self-assessment of the department's performance, what sort of criteria are you sort of setting your scoring against?
Well, on the first point, I think the things that we want to focus on for the coming year that I've mentioned, if they're achieved and if we're satisfied with the QA that we do on those achievements, we may be in a position to say they're very good. I think last year was the first time we were able to say good. So we are moving in the right direction. As far as the assessment of the services is concerned, we're going to work with the heads of service and the directors to come up with some criteria. This is quite novel. There isn't another authority in Wales that is actually undertaking this, so we haven't got any precedent that we can rely on or anything that we can build on. But we're going to look at things like training within the services, things like supervision within the services, and obviously number of complaints, turnaround times. So some of what you've seen corporately, but on a service by service basis, so that we can try and identify any issues or weaknesses that we can then try and focus on. So that would be how we would intend to do it.
Thank you very much.
I can't see any other hands up. Are there anybody else wanted to ask anything? I think no. I can't. I think that concludes that item. I think it's a case now of us to accept.
It's Gwilyn here.
Oh, sorry. I'm very sorry. Yeah, Gwilyn.
Ga I ofyn cwestiwn i chi?
Can I just ask you a question? Can I thank you for the report in the first instance? A very comprehensive report. You talked under Appendix 6, you referred to elements of the current work programme which continues to need attention, and you talked about the learning service, and you're talking about 2 pieces of work. Well, you're talking here up to March of this year, and there's been 6 months since then. Has there been any developments during the last 6 months in this particular area? No, there hasn't, no. And would you say you're disappointed in that? Well, I am disappointed that we have raised this issue a number of times, and this committee has also been supportive with this. But there's not much more we can do from my service's perspective. The answer from the learning service is that they've got a number of other priorities, and this isn't at the top of their list to do at the moment. So it's difficult for me to go back to them and ask for more than that. We've given them the resource to be able to do it. We've had a number of meetings with them and I'm not sure what else I can do, to be honest with you. And there's no kind of statutory requirements you can use to put pressure on the department to do this work. Well, the two elements are statutory. There is an expectation for them to be done.
Well,
Okay, thank you for the information.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
it's
Come
John
in.
Griffiths here.
Come in.
O'n i'n meddwl...
I was thinking of raising a similar point to what Gwilym has risen, but I note in your recommendations that you're asking for the education department, the learning service, that they respond to this committee directly. Can we get assurance, therefore, that we can have a response and an explanation by the next meeting, please? By the next meeting at the latest, please.
Sorry, dach chi eisiau fi atab?
Sorry, do you want me to respond, Chair?
Please.
What I would recommend is that you propose that as an amendment to the recommendations, and if there's a seconder and the committee agrees to that, that would give some backing to this, maybe? Yes, thank you, I'll do that. I'll second you, Councillor John Griffith.
So we now need to take a vote on that. We've got a proposer and a seconder. Can I go around then and start with Dylan Rees?
Cefnogi, support.
Alan Roberts?
Cefnogi.
Richard Griffiths?
Derbyn gwelliant, Mr Cadeirydd.
Accept the amendment, Chair.
Jeff Evans? I don't think he's here. Dilwyn Evans?
Agreed, thank you.
So that has been passed, and that will be implemented. We've I think Ms. Ball, now we've followed your thing and we've been round, and it's been accepted that report is available. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I think that concludes. I think what you require us now to do is to accept your report on the recommendations. So can I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Dylan Rees, proposed, Chair.
Thank you, Dylan Rees, and I've got a seconder.
I'll second that, Mr Chairman.
Richard Griffiths.
Thank you.
So I'll go around the members now, and I start with John Griffiths.
Derbyn, accept.
Alan Roberts.
Derbyn.
Gwilym Jones.
Derbyn.
Dilwyn Evans.
Agreed, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So that brings that item to a conclusion. I think then we move on to the fourth item, which is the concerns, complaints and whistleblowing 2020 to 2021. And I think Ms Lynn Ball is going to continue with this, please.
Thank you, Councillor Rogers. Fel dach chi weld,
As you can see, this is a report to do with concerns, complaints and whistleblowing, also from April 2020 to April 2021. The important points to note in the report are 43 corporate complaints were received during the reporting period. 2 of those were successful. 1 was partly successful. None of those complaints were accepted by the Ombudsman, so no investigation by the Ombudsman, who deals with appeals, if you like, against corporate complaints. The number of complaints during the period has reduced, gone down to 43 from 69 the previous year, and the number last year was similar to the previous years. And foresee this is also something to do with the COVID situation, and it's more of a glitch than a trend. We publish the data in this area on a high level monthly, and it's on the council website to be seen. 90% of the answers within the 20-day statutory period, and ask the services to keep in contact with the complainants if the responses are late, with an explanation why those responses are late. You'll see in paragraph 8 of the report that there's a breakdown of service by service regarding the 43 complaints. And in Appendix 1, there is information from the services about the lessons learned regarding the complaints that were successful. And of course, that's totally important to the authority and the expectation by the Ombudsman. Also, the report mentions complaints against elected members under the Code of Conduct. These are reported on anyway and are public to the Standards Committee at the end of the year, but there were no complaints at all against elected members of the council during the period. Also, the report mentions the Welsh language standards and any related complaints and the process in line. There were no internal complaints against the council policy during the reporting period, and no complaints either to the Welsh Language Commissioner either. And this is reported on separately in the annual report, and that link is in the report for you. Also, paragraph 14, we talk about the whistleblowing concerns. There were 2 complaints during the period. That information is in paragraph 14 and shows that we have acted on the 2 complaints that we did receive, and that the complainants did receive a response, and I've spoken to them as individuals and they've accepted the solution we put in place. Also, 2 other things to report on. First of all, that we've reviewed the policy to confirm that it coincides with the guidelines, i.e. the corporate complaints policy, that the Ombudsman has published new guidelines during the reporting period. There were changes, but they were minor things. They haven't changed the process, haven't changed the experience for someone using the process to be able to make a complaint. And then the final point to report on is that the constitution of the council has changed and been updated to recognise the new responsibilities for this committee. You now have a terms of reference, which includes a duty regarding the process of corporate complaints. So that has been recognised in the constitution. Therefore, the recommendation to this report is that the content of the report gives reasonable assurance to the committee that the council is effectively the council's ability to handle complaints effectively. And happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, I can hear a voice. Yeah. Richard.
Thank you to you for the report, Lynn. On page 27, you refer to complaints about members. In general, going towards the Ombudsman, does the person being complained against have the right to receive the evidence gathered against them? If the Ombudsman moves on and progresses with the case and opens it at a case and investigates into it, yes, the Ombudsman does have to share the evidence that is relevant to that issue. There is an opportunity for the member to respond to any evidence that has been presented to the Ombudsman. Okay, thank you, Chair.
I've also got another hand up. I've got Dilwyn with a hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about on item 8, the summary of concerns and complaints. I see that as far as complaints are concerned, something like 2/3 of the complaints were against 3 departments. I was wondering, that's also resources, housing and planning, whether there is anything that can be done to, if you like, predict and prevent further complaints. Is there any common theme in these complaints that's identifiable?
We do certainly ask the services complaints officers, who are the ones who are obviously focusing on this area, to identify any trends or issues. But we're not reporting on that in this report. We report on the complaints that are upheld, not the complaints that are lodged.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can't see any other hands. If I've missed anybody, can they shout out with another question? Otherwise, yes. Fine. John.
No, fine, sorry, I'm muting. And atodiad un
In Appendix 1 there's a reference to the lack of response to communications, emails and so on. If I listen to the public, this is a common theme, that there's a lack of response, lack of acknowledgement and so on. Not from each department, of course, not from each officer, of course, but how common are these kind of complaints regarding the lack of response to any kind of requests from the public? The numbers of complaints about lack of responses isn't very high. There's some kind of disconnect between the stories we hear from members and what comes in through the complaints process. Yes, I think the COVID situation, of course, doesn't help. We can't go physically into the council building more than the public can. We depend on email systems, phone systems and so on, and it does complicate things, but that's the reality of the situation we are in. Then maybe there is a disconnect here, I suspect, of what the public believe and what actually is happening within the council. But also, you are aware, I think, that the chief executive has mentioned this previously, that there's a process happening at the moment, and I think this is part of a conversation with recent members briefing, that there is a new telephone system being introduced to the council at the moment, in the hope that that will also improve the situation and the accountability and people answering their phones quicker and putting calls through to the correct services. We hope that will contribute as well. I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of many people here by saying about time. Thank you.
Anybody else? I think just following that point that John brought up then, the fact that the chief executive did send directions recently about the response time, from emails or from calls, particularly acknowledging them, within 2 or 3 days, and then also the letter. So it has been highlighted, and I think we're very glad if it's going to now improve, because there's nothing more frustrating, and it does let us down if we don't get those done. I think that brings that to an end, and I think that it's the recommendation is that the
Mr. Chairman.
Sorry.
Yes. John Griffiths.
Yep.
I think that it's nice to be able to note in the graph within the report under item 8 there that there's so many praises and praise come into the council as well. And I'm sure everyone was very deserved to be praised. But also just note that there's many more praises than there were complaints, and that's nice to hear always as well. Just if we could also note that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I just add to that as well, Chair, and agree totally with Councillor John Griffith. The words of praise are higher, and we must remember also where there is reference to complaints, we do see, as Mr. Evans noted earlier, we do see that the majority of the complaints are in those departments who have regular contact with the public. There are some departments who don't have as much day-to-day contact with the complaints. The complaints are to be seen in those departments who deal with the public from a day-to-day basis as well.
Thank you very much. I think the recommendation is that the committee accepts that this report provides reasonable assurance that the council handles its complaints effectively and makes no recommendation in relation to the council's ability to handle complaints effectively. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Mr. Kadiri.
Richard Griffiths. And Gwilym. Thank you very much indeed. Can we go around? John Griffiths.
Derbyn. Derbyn.
Delatrice.
Yes, accepting. Can I just add on that last point highlighted by Councillor Gwilym Jones and Councillor John Griffith? The report shows that there's 4.5 times more compliments than number of concerns, which I think speaks for itself. Diolch.
Thank you. I think only Dilwyn is. I think I've been around everybody. Dilwyn.
Okay, accepted. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. All right, thank you very much. I think that we now move on again to the next item. Again is Mr. Ball, and it's it's to inform the Governance and Audit Committee of the current situation with regard to the policy acceptance across the council. Please.
Thank you, Councillor Rogers. Fel dach chi'n ymwybodol,
this is about the policy portal, and this is a digital system used by the council to share corporate policies within the council and to update them when they're available to staff. They're there as a resource, but staff also use the system to make sure that staff read policies, read the main policies and the crucial ones, that they answer questions regarding the policies and then accept the policies and to operate under those policies. There are 9 specific policies that have to be accepted by council staff once every 2 years, and they're listed in the reports. Because of COVID, it was agreed by the senior team that there was to pause the policy in March 2020, and then we restarted in September last year. So the report is for the period of a year, but the year starts later than usual. You'll see in 3.1 that it recognises the policies accepted during the reporting period. So 5 policies. Appendix 1 shows the level of compliance, and the levels are high. They're in the 90s, the mid-90s. The only issue is the housing service. This has been an issue for some time. The number of people following the policy portal is fewer than in other departments. However, we do have a pattern emerging with the senior team raising this issue with the head of service, and we do receive a report every 8 weeks as a senior team. and then the housing team are catching up. So during the past year, they have been keeping up. So I'm not overly concerned regarding that pattern. And if we think that the reason for this pattern is because so many of the members of staff in that team are working out of the office, they're not in front of a computer every day, but they are managing to keep up. So the compliance levels for the whole establishment are steady, and that's for the past 4 years since the policy portal was implemented. During the reporting period as well, we have followed a pilot scheme for managers. So we've chosen 4 additional policies that are relevant or more relevant to managers than the majority of staff, and they have been selected by the senior team. Paragraph 3.2 in the report talks about those policies, the policies chosen, and then in Appendix 2, you can see the level of compliance, 99% in relation to 2 of the policies, 93 for the other policy, and then 1 out at the moment. There are 2 specific issues to raise with the committee. You've heard the first several times by now. We do have a number of workers in the council, around 700 workers, without access to the policy portal. And it was agreed last year that we would operate a system where members of staff without access would come in to the council chambers to be trained on the main areas, so recognising what was required for them in their work, and then bring them in and to hold training sessions face-to-face with them, go through the questions with them in the same way as the policy portal would do, and then get people to sign up to the policies. This had been prepared, a date had been arranged, the paperwork had been agreed with the social services manager, but then obviously COVID hit. So because of that, it didn't happen, and it's not likely that it will move forward anytime soon. And that's because we are still in the COVID period and we can't bring people into the chamber to train them. So you are already aware that there is no digital answer to this issue without going into, without cost. So this has been put on hold, not just for the past year, but maybe for the upcoming year. The report just notes that it's important to recognise that a number of areas in the policy portal is to do with staff training, but of course that's not doesn't provide the same assurance as the policy portal. Bringing people into meetings and getting them to sign up after getting that training. So I want to raise this with you just to be transparent that there is an issue with this. The other issue that was raised previously, I think it has been resolved by working with HR workers who aren't employed by the council, but who still provide work within our systems, maybe agency staff, more often people who work between Morn and Gwynedd, but that they're not employed by Anglesey. We have arranged a system, and this is in operation at the moment, and we are happy that this is working properly. So I think this problem has been resolved. So the next steps will be to report to the senior leadership team regarding the corporate policies, when the 9 outs at the moment will come to an end, and then also to bring a report to the senior leadership team regarding the pilots to managers. And when that's come to an end, there's 1 out at the moment. So when that date is up, then we'll go back to the managers for feedback. Was it useful? What would they like to see? What can we do to improve and to help before taking that to the senior leadership team? But the recommendation in the report is just to note the current position with regards to the policy acceptance across the council. But of course, if you have any recommendations or comments, I'm more than happy to listen. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I can't see any hands up at the moment. Can you shout out if you...
Mr. Chair?
Oh, yeah, certainly, Bishop.
Yeah, diolch, Lynn.
Thank you, Lynn. You referred to training with care home managers and so forth. What does this mean when new staff come in? With regards to new staff coming in who are already part of the policy acceptance portal, the system will recognise them within a day after coming onto the system. So the policy portal starts for them when they start with the council, and then that just continues. But of course, with those who don't have access, then they are trained in the role as part of their role. But certainly that they don't have the access to the policy portal or anything similar to this as we had previously arranged. There we are. Thank you for that.
Is anybody else want to ask a question?
Yes. John Griffiths,
yeah, John. Yep.
If my voice holds. Lynn,
Lynn, referring to the staff who, without access to the portal, the percentage is over 700 people. That's quite high. Has it been registered on the council's risk register? And if so, what is the rating? I think it has been noted on the risk register, but I'm not sure what the rating is. But I can speak with the relevant officer and come back to you with with an answer if you want. Yes, thank you. One thing I would like to comment on to do with this, because it is a problem everywhere, I should imagine. Have you checked with other councils to see how they have responded to this issue? Other councils don't use the same system as us. They don't have a portal. I think Gwynedd uses something similar, but they don't use the click to accept portal in the same way as we do. It's just a library of policies for them, from what I've understood. And I think others just send policies out to staff. They don't have an acceptance system like we do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that completes the question. And I think with that we'll go to the recommendation. And the recommendation is that the committee is requested to note the current position with regard to policy acceptance across the council. And I need a proposer and a seconder. I need a proposer first. I've got John Griffiths.
Yes, propose.
Yep. Thank you. And I want a seconder as well.
Alan Roberts, second.
Sorry?
Alan Roberts.
Oh, sorry. Fine. Thank you very much indeed. So I'll go round now. Dylan Rees.
Derbyn, accept.
Gwelym Jones.
Derbyn.
Accept.
Richard Griffiths. Probably Richard's on mute, is he?
I had to go out for a minute, Mr. Chair. Accept.
It's all right. Thank you.
Accept.
Sorry. And Dilwyn.
I accept. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that concludes your role now, Ms. Ball. Thank you very much indeed. You've waded through three quite interesting documents there. Thank you very much indeed. I think that we now go on to the Audit Wales on to 6, and it's the external audit, the financial sustainability assessment, and I think this is going to be given. I think welcome, Mr. Alan Hughes, is it?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll be certainly presenting the next 2 items. My colleague Bethan Roberts, who's with us today, will be taking us through the workforce planning report, and then it's probably quickly back to myself for item 9, letter to the Chair, if that's okay with you.
That's terrific. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
If I can just look at the financial assessment. This is a positive report, but there are challenges continuing. Looking at the content of the report on page 3, the main findings is that the Council has a good understanding of its financial situation, that you have provided services within budget, but as I referred to earlier, that there are still financial challenges continuing. What I'd like to do firstly is to look at page 6, and you'll see there that Exhibit 2 shows the additional funding from Welsh Government and how that has helped with the effect of COVID on the Council and other councils, of course. There are additional costs. There is a loss of income. It has been funded by Welsh Government with regards to a small element, and there is additional funding for digital transformation and savings. Going on to the next part of the report, increasing budgets recently by the Council, especially to do with care services, have put the Council in a good position to be able to provide services within the budgets. And the additional funding in 2020-21 is an important part of that success. It's also a pleasure to report that the general reserves is on target, and you'll recall that there were concerns about 2-3 years ago regarding the tendency, but the Council has put measures in place to bring that reserves back to the target level, and so that's something to be glad about. There is reference on page 9 regarding using 300,000 of reserves to balance the 2021-22 budget. I'm sure Mark will be pushing back a little bit on this. What I would say is, yes, it is a small sum of money, but by using balances, it does mean that then the savings needs to be finding elsewhere and in the budgets for the coming year. So I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill regarding this. We move on to page 10. Again, I refer to this. The Council has provided services within budgets during the past 2 years. It was a little bit different to the patterns of the previous years, but partly the additional contributions to some of the core budgets of the Council have allowed you to do this. And you'll see that in paragraph 13, there's reference made to adults and children's services. Moving on then to page 11, it is true to say by now that finding savings is becoming more of a challenge, and this isn't something locally to Anglesey, it's a challenge across every council in the country. And this brings us on to Exhibit 7 on page 12. When we take the percentage of planned savings and delivered savings, you'll see at the bottom line on the table, it gives you around an 80%. And coming home from school, maybe with a score of 80% from school, we would have all been glad years ago. But the only thing, the health warning that I have regarding this is if you look at the first line on the table in Exhibit 7. So from time to time, the council has been trying to deliver savings, and then by achieving 80%, it means, of course, that 20% haven't been achieved. And so this then creates an overspend of £500,000 for the year. What I would say is it is a difficult situation, and it shows the importance of planning plans if they are needed in future. So financial planning, and 80% is a good score and an acceptable percentage, and a substantial percentage. We need to remember the effect of the other 20% and what that means to the council. Then the last page talks about, page 13 talks about fluidity. I don't want to worry too much about this. It's just showing tendencies and trends, and it's showing bringing a lot of things together. And if you look at Exhibit 8 there, you'll see that in the last line that the figure comes down from 1.8, which is consistent with a period when the council's reserves were lower and there was an element of an overspend. Then you'll see that then it raises, and then that's consistent with the underspend and reserves raising again. So what the thing I would take from this is that it shows a pattern, but the truth about it is what happened with the situation of underspend or overspend, and the council has underspent during the past 2 years, and because of investment in core budgets, and that's good to see. There is one recommendation talking about updating the strategy of controlling assets, and of course this has gone past its renewal date, but this is the only thing I have to say. Maybe Mark will have a little bit to share as well. Thank you, Alan. Yes, I think this is a very supportive report of our financial arrangements, and I am thankful to Audit Wales for their comments. And to summarise the situation in this report, I think it's true to say that the investments that the council has made in some services sets a budget that is reflective of the services provided by other services, and perhaps the budget doesn't. Over the past 2 years, things have brought budgets together, and the budget is much stronger now. That's not to say that things won't change, and perhaps we will need to look at the budgets moving forward when the demands on different services changes as we come out of this challenging period. But this financial situation has improved, as you can see from last year. Last year wasn't an usual year. And maybe due to luck or a little bit of help, a lot of help by Welsh Government, that has strengthened our financial situation. And I think that's not just true for Anglesey, but it's true for a lot of councils in Wales. But of course, there will be challenges as we come out of the pandemic that will put more of a strain on our services, increase demand for services, and then incur further costs. I have raised this as a risk with the executive, and the executive have agreed to raise the balances higher than the usual 5% that we have been setting as a figure. And we have included £1.5 million of additional funds to raise the balances to 9 million, so which puts us in a little bit a stronger position in case our costs increase substantially over the past year and the next year. I do accept the points regarding the reserves, and that the council don't always hit the mark 100%, but we are looking, as has been suggested last year, I think, by the external auditors, to set a target that's higher. That's what's needed for balancing the budgets, to ensure that we do have a little bit of money left over, so to speak, if we don't achieve that target 100%. Between the last year, we didn't see to make any savings for 2020, 21, 22, so that wasn't a problem. But who knows what the situation will be like next year and the following year as we move forward. Hopefully we'll have a better idea from Welsh Government after the end of October, because they will have accepted the 3-year figures from Westminster, and possibly they will be in a situation to give us a better idea, maybe a more long-term idea of what their financial situation is and how they will be funding local governments moving forward. So again, this is something to keep in mind when we are looking for savings. And then just to note, the indicator 8 on, or exhibit 8 on paragraph 17, I do accept that it is trying to show us something. I have made the point to Alan, I'm not sure what exactly it's showing us and whether it is of any worth. But if you do look at the figures regarding liquidity, it does show that our financial situation has strengthened a little bit, and that coincides with the other figures in the report. So on that note, just one other point in the recommendation to update the asset management plan that is in hand at the moment. We are trying to see how we can link this plan with the capital strategy of the council, because it's important that both those documents work together. So there's more work to link and join those two plans together. But I do hope that we will quite soon be able to bring this plan to the executive to be adopted as the plan for asset management for the next 5 years. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. I've got two hands that I've registered. The first one, I think, is Dylan Rees, and then Richard Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Mr. Hughes for the report. And it's very encouraging to hear him describe it as a positive report. So that is really good to hear. And Mr. Hughes has actually answered the question that I wanted to raise, which is in relation to sort of the council's failure to deliver planned savings of 100%, and they've sort of fallen to 86% the previous year, and then 79% the last year. And I was going to ask, is that a trend around the rest of Wales with the local authorities? And he's already pointed out, yes, it is, that local authorities across Wales are finding it very challenging to actually identify and deliver savings. And my comment would be that, okay, we're not hitting the 100%, we're only sort of hitting around the 80% mark, but when we're already cutting services to the bone, it's very difficult to actually deliver the savings to the full extent that we've tried to identify. And I think the reality is, moving forward, if we're forced to identify savings, well, yes, if our arm is being twisted around our back, we're going to have to try and do it. but when you cut services to the bone, it's increasingly difficult to deliver those planned savings. And I think that's the reality of the situation. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Alan, did you want to respond to that at all?
I think it was as much as statements from Cynghorydd Dylan Rees as much as anything. We do see other councils experiencing similar difficulties delivering saving schemes. Early saving schemes that were quite simplistic in nature were very easy to deliver, and because we've been in a period of austerity now for a number of years, the savings are getting more harder, more complex. They take longer time to deliver. So yeah, it's a tough environment, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So thank you very much. Yeah, I've got and then I think Richard is.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, diolch yn Helen.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Mark. Maybe this will sound a little bit morbid, but I feel, despite COVID-19, that some people have become more independent, and that it's not much of a need on for services. And I think the main danger regarding savings, maybe we won't need much savings. Maybe people will be looking after each other and be saying that they don't want services and that they will continue as they have been.
Yep, I think again that was more of a statement. Is there anybody else with his hand up?
Yeah, Gwilym.
Yeah, sorry, Gwilym.
Iawn, well,
to start with, can I thank Mr. Alan Hughes? Thank you very much for the report. It's quite positive, and it's talking about 80%, and he would have been happy to come home from school with 80%. But having said that, what teacher used to tell me was good, but not good enough. That's what my teacher used to tell me years ago, but that's another story. As it's been referred to previously, we have had 10 years of austerity from Westminster. Unfortunately, that's what we've had, cuts and cuts and cuts, and a lot of us have had to face these cuts over the years, and it hasn't been easy at all. But it's nice to see that things are starting to improve. Now then, you were talking in paragraph 13, for example, that the main reason behind you referring to adult services and children's services, and you see, as you refer to themselves, you see the same sort of pattern emerging in other authorities, certainly not just here in Wales, but through the whole of Britain. But certainly, I think to do with children's services, I think we are starting to show the way here in Anglesey with our Cael Trefi Clyd policy. And there are other authorities seeing what we're doing here, and they are glad to see this process. And by now, we are able to assist other authorities with this. One matter I am keen to raise, and maybe Mark Jones will be able to answer this question. We are talking about a situation over the past 18 months. We know the way our carers have worked so hard. They've put hours in. They're on their knees. They have worked so hard, going from home to home, assisting people. Now then, we know that there is a recommendation of a 3% pay rise for carers in the health sector. And if I've understood it, that this has been rejected by the health sector, this 3%, and it's been rejected by the carers. Maybe Mark can correct me if I'm wrong. But now then, if the health care workers are going to have 3% or something similar to this. What do you foresee the carers in the care sector will have, and what does that mean to us here in Anglesey? Thank you. Of course, we do have two different types of carers working on the island, the council staff, and then we do have staff working for providers who are part of the private sectors working on a contract with us. To start with our own staff, I think the final proposal being made by the employer regarding the pay rise to staff generally across the council, it's been 1 3/4%. The unions still haven't accepted that offer, and they are still, like you were saying, pointing to the pay rise in health, and that carers in health are getting more of a pay rise, and there should be fairness between both sectors. The problem we have, of course, is that we can't differentiate between a pay rise for some members of staff and not to others. We have two main agreements regarding pay, teachers and then the rest of the staff. So we can't differentiate, and it is not a decision for the council alone. It is an agreement across Wales and England. So the councils in England and Wales are part of this one offer. So we'll see how things play out. There is, of course, two ways of measuring pay. We have what they call the national living wage, which is the minimum that the employees have to pay their staff, and then what's called the real living wage, which is what the Living Wage Foundation say this is what the minimum should be for anyone in England, Wales, in Britain generally. This is what they need per hour to be able to live above the poverty threshold. The council does pay above the real living wage to all its staff, so the council staff do tend to have a better deal than people in the private sector. Of course, it is up to each private provider to decide on how much they pay their staff. And possibly there are some, I'm not going to say that the private sector pays poorly. I'm not saying this, but generally there is similarity between the pay received by carers in the private sector, and this is a little bit lower than what the carers in the council receive. Following the pandemic, there will be a pay rise for carers, and if this happens, and we have worked out a high-level figure for this, but if our providers, private sector providers, raised their staff's pay from being the national living wage to the real living wage, which is paying around £1 an hour higher, would they pass that cost on to the council then through the fee that we pay per hour? We do think it's something like £750,000 higher to the council. So without the help of Welsh Government in the settlement, it's difficult, very difficult for the council to be able to fund that sort of increase in our costs, unless it either comes as part of the settlement, or the only other way would be to fund such a pay rise would be through council tax and raising council tax. £750,000 of an increase would be something like a 2% increase in council tax, so that we have enough of an income to pay for such an additional cost. So it is a large, substantial sum for us, and it is a national issue. and it is out of the council's hands. The settlement is out of our hands. This is something that needs to be sorted across England and Wales and so forth. The risk, of course, to the council and to the sector as a whole is that people will go and do something else. It's easier to work in a shop for more pay and less stress, less, easier work, all that sort of work that creates the pressures for carers. You can imagine what they've gone through the past year, and there might be a substantial risk that we can't employ carers or enough carers to be able to meet the needs, to be able to cover out there in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other further questions? This is just one, Alan, that I would like, and I think I was going to page 7. On page 7 at the bottom of the thing, on the bottom of the page, the council's corporate asset management plan for land and buildings for the period 2015 to 2020 is out of date and needs to be updated. What sort of difference would that make then if that was updated? Would that change the figures quite a bit?
Well, I suppose given that it's aged now, the aspirations of the council in terms of its assets may well have changed. So it will be an opportunity to look again really at what is the asset base that the council needs, but also it will be an opportunity for Mark and the team to make that obvious link with what the council would desire, but balance that against the affordability without leaving too bad the legacy for the future generations at the same time. So there's a really tough balancing act there.
Yeah, thank you. Would it be, yeah, thank you very much indeed. Would it be unfair to ask Mark to comment, or would you rather have time to think about it, Mark?
No problem. I'll make a comment. The asset management plan has to set out what we have in terms of buildings and what our future needs are, what the condition of those buildings and assets are, what investment is needed to ensure that they at least are in a condition that is fit for purpose, and then it's for the executive to set out, the strategy moving forward on how many of these buildings we actually need to deliver the services in a modern way. And it may be that we may have to, we may not want the number of buildings we have at the moment because it doesn't fit what the services require moving forward. But there's also an issue of, can we afford to keep the number of buildings we have, given the constraints on capital and the cost of maintaining these assets? It's a balancing act between the two of what we need and then what we can afford to have. And that's where the asset management plan comes in and feeds into the capital strategy. So it's the asset management plan will set out what we need in terms of buildings and what the cost is in terms of maintaining them, and then it links into the capital strategy of what we can afford to maintain and how much budget we can put in the revenue side for repairs and maintenance, and on the capital side for the larger investments. And then you've also then got the added complication, of course, of achieving the carbon reduction, being carbon zero by 2030 or whatever the council sets as its target. That investment will be significant and will require some big changes to some of our buildings to ensure that we achieve that target. And maybe in the course of that assessment, we may come to the conclusion that some buildings we can't make them carbon neutral, and that would be another reason why some of them may have to go. So there's a lot of issues surrounding asset management that needs to be sorted as we move forward.
Thank you very much indeed for that response.
Councillor John Griffiths wants to raise a question now.
Yeah, sorry, I
Thank you.
John, I'm very sorry. Yep.
No, it's all right, no problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question.
I have a question for Alan Hughes. In point number 10 there, I'm sure you have referred to it last year as well. You're saying that the council continues to use reserves to balance the budget and that this is not sustainable. And then further on, you say that it's lessens resilience to fund and foresee budget pressures in future years. Do you think that the current system we have is a risk to the council that needs to be changed immediately? Thank you. As I mentioned, going through the reports, the figure of around 300,000 in reserves has funded the 2021-22 budget. I'm sure what I'd like to reflect is around 2-3 years ago, when the tendency of an overspend and reserves going down, I would have been more concerned at that time than I am today. The only concern after today, I would imagine, is by funding things through reserves, then it does mean that it's difficult to fund things from somewhere else the following year. Increases council tax. I think I didn't want to, I said in reference to this, I didn't want to make a mountain out of a molehill. But yes, it would have been more of an issue 2-3 years ago than it is this year. It's not something that we'd promote, but it's not the end of the world either. Okay, thank you. It was just that sustainability word, that's what got me, and I was just concerned. I thought that was mentioned last year as well.
For me to make a comment as well, Mr. Chairman?
Sorry, very sorry. Go.
Yeah.
I have advised the members, I think, since being here, that using reserves as a way of balancing the budget isn't a sustainable strategy in the long term. But when the budget was set last year, I was aware that our balances were likely to be in a stronger position, and we did have a little bit of a scope to use some of those balances. 300,000 isn't a lot in terms of the budgets, the council's budget. It's not a huge amount of money, but I was aware of the savings that were going to come for the following year, that we would have been able to use to fill in those gaps. I did have 300,000 of savings from the school dinners contract. I knew it was coming in the next financial year, so that was going to fund the gap in one amount. That was just one amount without having to look for further savings. So we'd factored that in, and I had advised the executive regarding this. Yes, you can use that 300,000 this year, but there will be savings from the school dinners contract that will be coming in to fill that gap next year. Moving on to next year's budget, 2022-23. Again, we will there will be an assessment of the situation, but the strategy is more or less not to use balances unless we have no other option. But I will try and get members of the executive to agree to a proposal on the budget that's not reliant on balances to balance the budget. if we can. I'm not saying 100% how we will be able to. It depends how things pan out with regards to the figures from Welsh Government and how the budget is looking, and how much of a gap there is between the increase in the budget and the additional sum from Welsh Government and the additional sum that we can create by increasing the council tax. So it is a matter of seeing closer to the time how those figures look. But generally, I would not advise the executive to use balances, and I don't think it is going to be part of any strategy in the long term to use balances year after year just to balance the budget, because once you've used them once, they've gone, haven't they? Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you very much. Does that bring it? Is there any? Can I see any other hands up, or is? I think that brings. I think it's what we really need to do now is to approve these financial sustainability assessment. Can I have a proposer and a seconder to accept this report?
Craig, Gwilym.
Gwilym, Joe, Gwilym.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
That's Richard, is it?
Yeah.
Right. So we can just go around. It's John Griffiths.
Derbyn, accept.
Dylan Rees.
Derbyn, accept.
Alan Roberts.
Derbyn.
And Dilwyn Evans. Dilwyn Evans.
Accept, thank you.
Thank you. I think that we move on now to the item 7, which is the progress review of the North Wales Growth Deal, the North Wales Economic Ambition Board. Were you doing this again, Mr. Alan Hughes, or you're passing this on to?
I can certainly say a few words about the report, Chair. Is there somebody to respond to the comments? I know that Alwyn Williams is also on the call, so maybe if Alwyn can follow my comments, or consider taking questions from the members.
Is he here?
She is here. Yes. Hello. Brenda.
You've livened the meeting up. Very sorry.
No problem. Yes, I'm here and very happy to take any questions. Yeah, absolutely.
Very sorry.
Diolch, Alwyn.
Okay.
I'm just going to be very short with this report. The main message is that it's a positive report, a number of elements of assurance for the Audit Committee. And when the report was agreed, we did identify that there were opportunities to continue to develop the growth bid. So if I just jump to page 7, we identify that there is a clear governance framework in place. At the time, some elements needed to be achieved. Then jumping to page 10, it was apparent that the Portfolio Management Office had the resources, and when gaps were identified, those gaps are filled and resources are put in place. So that the situation is resolved. And then on page 13, it's apparent that the success of the growth deal depends on a number of factors that can change, and that needs to be remembered when moving forward with the growth deal. We have made 6 recommendations. They're on page 5 of the report. But instead of me talking about those, would it be a good time for me to transfer to Alwyn, so that Alwyn can tell you how things have developed since the report was written? Yes, thank you, Alan.
I think it's fair to say that things are moving relatively quickly, and even since the report was submitted, we have responded to a number of the recommendations proposed in the report. More progress will have been done by the time we report back at the end of the year on the 6 recommendations that have been made. And considering COVID and Brexit, the economic situation has changed and continues to be flexible, I'd say. The recommendations put forward are recommendations that we as the programme office agreed with. Nothing has come out of the review or the recommendations shocked us or weren't something we were anticipating, and a number of the recommendations referred to pieces of work that we'd already started. Looking back at the review, this was the first review for us from Audit Wales since we were established as a portfolio office for the Ambition Board. We weren't sure what the process would be or what it would offer us, but I think on reflection, it was an extremely useful process. It's quite positive to have someone's opinion through a review like this one, and also recommendations for improvements, because we're a new team and we've been focusing on driving things forward. So I think it was quite a positive process for us and a useful process, and it was useful to have these recommendations, and we'll be preparing an additional report by the end of the year to report back on progress against these 6 recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm looking now for any hands up. I can see Dilwyn is. The floor is yours, Dilwyn.
He's on mute, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. You're on mute, Dilwyn. Sorry.
I wanted to thank you. I think that's one of the features of Zoom that will go down in history.
Yes.
You're on mute. I just wanted to ask, have any projects actually started? Shovels gone into the ground?
No, not shovels into the ground yet, but we have presented 3 outline business cases to the Economic Ambition Board now. Those 3 outline business cases have been recommended by the board to move forward to the next phase of business case development, which is the final business case development. So there are 3 projects that are now moving forward into final business case, which involves the procurement process. We're looking, in terms of shovels in the ground, we're looking at the end of this year, possibly into next year, before actually construction work can start.
There's a tendency at the moment for prices to rocket. Is that likely to cause some problem?
Yeah, I think it's been recognised across all growth deals throughout the UK, actually, that the availability of resources, the availability of construction material and skills required is a huge potential risk. As with any major project or programme, we are recognising and managing those risks and making an assumption that the economy, in the most, I think there's a chance that the economy will settle before we are in the phase of procurement where the majority of our spending sort of happens. But again, we're working against the set of assumptions because the economy has been so volatile. That the benefit, I think, of working on a growth deal where there are many other growth deals across the UK and in Scotland, Ireland and Wales that we can learn from and sort of share and take on board best practice, that there's going to need to be intervention in the market to ensure that we can move these projects forward, because it is going to be a risk that we possibly can't mitigate. And, you know, we don't want to be in a situation where we have to de-scope a project, because we've set out the value that we want to get for North Wales through the growth deal, and that's what we intend to derive from the investments we make. Barriers such as rising costs, availability of skills and materials will play against us, but will be managed as with all of the risks and issues that we have.
Thank you. Do you envisage any planning problems?
That there will be planning considerations. The construction projects in the most. I think the key thing is to work with the project sponsors and the local authority planning teams early enough in the process, actually, so that we recognise what potential risks and issues are, how they may delay us or challenges, and then work through each of those in turn. You're always going to get planning concerns or considerations, but I do feel that, you know, the growth deal is something that there is an appetite to see these projects come in, because they've been designed to deliver growth opportunities and jobs, and the economy needs that. So hopefully nothing that will prevent us from moving things forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I can't. Are there any more?
Yeah.
In the first instance, can I thank Alwen Williams for her report and for reporting fully. We have become good friends by now because she's a regular visitor to the Partnership and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee. And actually, we're talking about very special plans here. We can see that 6 authorities across North Wales are part of this plan, and the growth plan managers report regularly to the 6 authorities. We were discussing one report yesterday afternoon, as it happens, and Mrs. Anwen Morgan, the Chief Executive, and Mr. Dylan Williams, the Deputy, presented the report to us. But in the end, we're talking about 2036. That is the vision, to see around 4,000 jobs created by 2036. So what interests me, perhaps some members here don't understand the background. They haven't had the background that we have in the Scrutiny Committee. So perhaps it would be good if you could talk about the projects that are relevant to us here on Anglesey, and I'm thinking specifically about Moral Ice. Yes, the Moral Ice project is to do with generating carbon-free energy using the tidal stream. It's a project that invests through the growth deal in infrastructure, which would take the energy generated in the sea using the tidal stream, and then transferring that energy from the sea to the grid. And the growth deal would invest in the Moral Ice scheme in the infrastructure. I think the main benefit of Moral Ice is that it creates low carbon energy, but it also attracts attention from technology companies who devise the technology that goes into the sea to create this energy. These companies are spread across the world and they're looking at Wales, they're looking at North Wales and the Morlais project specifically to bring their technology here to be trialled to see if it works, so that they can then as companies invest in creating this product as a commercial product. So I'd say that the Morlais project is the first of its type in the world. And Anglesey is the focus of this attention, and Anglesey is being given the opportunity to invite the technology companies to bring their products here to North Wales, and also recognition of what we have in terms of natural resources that help us to create low carbon energy. So it's a challenging project, but it will bring a lot of benefits, not only locally, but across North Wales and further afield as well. Thank you for that. And if I could just mention the Gateway project in Holyhead. You know, we're talking about Morlais, which is a project that is being prioritised. It's very high up on your list. And then the Gateway project is a long-term one. Could you expand about that project in Holyhead? Yes, there are two parts to the project in Holyhead Port. Work needs to be done on the barrier to ensure the future of the port in Holyhead. Work needs to be done to renovate the breakwater in one section. But the part that the growth deal is most interested in is the land reclamation project, which is looking at how we can use the land surrounding the port to create new jobs and to attract new tenants to the port. To be tenants who can create jobs for future generations and to develop industry around the port. So there are two parts. One is dependent on the other. The investment in the breakwater. Well, the future of the port itself is dependent on investment in the breakwater. But then what you have is the development around the port and the hope of creating jobs. And these would be long-term, high-value jobs and jobs for future generations around the port, which is a very exciting part of the plans. Thank you.
Robert.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. As Gwilym mentioned, he was talking about the meeting yesterday. I must be honest, a number of the councillors who were present in the meeting yesterday were a little concerned about reading the report presented to us, which was the Q1 report. I know it's very early days, but a number of projects, for example, were behind schedule. That caused a bit of concern. And one of the decisions we made was exactly what Audit Wales has done. We felt that there were risks involved here that need to be escalated within the board's work. You've referred about the problems naturally with the workforce, the labour market, resources, materials and so on. And one concern I had was Yes, I can see these projects being realised, but with costs increasing and so on, will they be exactly what we have hoped to have? Or will they not give us value for money? You've talked about the breakwater one part of the project depending on the other. You know, there's sometimes a question mark about what can be achieved because on matters that are out of our hands. But I'm really pleased that Audit Wales has escalated this risk issue because there are risks. Thank you. Yes, certainly. And we do have a risk register and we are reporting back to our portfolio board before going to the ambition board to report on the risk and specifically about bringing more information forward for those projects that are displaying more risks than others, so that we can deal openly with the risks and to take appropriate decisions about how to get the benefit out of the investment. What we were told yesterday was that you're looking at some other ambition boards in Scotland and Ireland, for example, who've started their work before us, and that you're learning from their work and from their experiences. We know how much money is in the pot, but perhaps we need to start a discussion with the UK and the Welsh government. Listen, things have changed. Perhaps we'll need some more funding. Yes, it's true. There is a group in place now of portfolio management offices across Wales, Scotland and Ireland. And we are sharing good practice. We do that quite regularly. And one of the things that will be the next challenge for us is to put a strategy in place that will show how we'll bring private sector investment into this. We have an agreement in place with both governments to provide £120 million each into the growth deal for North Wales. But that is based on investments from the private sector as well. So that strategy is an ongoing piece of work, and we're trying our best to learn from the other growth plans, things that have worked, things that haven't worked, and what would be good practice to use in the North Wales strategy. Thank you.
I can't see anybody else is asking anything. I think we've got to vote. Alwyn, can I just thank you very much indeed. The enthusiasm that you've brought to this is tremendous. And I think we all need reminding that even, long established businesses today are going through very difficult decisions because of these massive escalations in costs and everything else. We really got to believe in it. And I believe in the way that you've delivered this. You're believing in it, and jolly good luck to you. Thank you very much. Can I ask now? I think we need now to accept the progress review of the North Wales economic deal. Can I have a proposer? Yeah.
Yes, can I propose? Yes, Dylan Andrews, I second the proposal.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. Can I go around the group now to get it? John Griffiths.
Accept.
Alan Roberts.
Accept.
Richard Griffiths.
Mr. Cadere.
I accept, Chair.
And Dilwyn Evans.
Accept, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So that concludes that item 7, and now we go on to item 8, which is the again Audit Wales. It's the workforce planning. Who is? I can see Alan is smiling. Is that?
He's smiling because he's handing it over.
Yeah, Alan is smiling, Chair, because I'm going to introduce Bethan Roberts to aid me with this next item. But Bethan is a very familiar face with officers in Anglesey, and so over to Bethan, please, to share the to share the main messages from this report.
Thank you very much.
Diolch, Pam da bawb.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to present a report we did on the workforce planning. Of course, workforce planning is important to identify workforce needs today, in future, identify any gaps and how to respond proactively to matters that come up. And then if I can refer you to page 3 in the report, the main findings are set out there, and they have been agreed with the Council. So after experiencing challenges with the workforce in the Children's and Family Services, the Council is now focusing more on workforce planning and has further opportunities to achieve more of those benefits. We came to that conclusion due to the 3 subheadings you can see there. The Council did have a workforce strategy, but it hasn't been embedded across all services. The approach to workforce planning taken by the Council's Children and Family Services helped it to respond to the challenges it's faced in terms of the workforce. And then the Council is now more focused on workforce planning and is putting more focus to the work, and there is evidence of that on page 6 to 9. And there are more benefits possible for all Council services. If I can draw your attention to page 9, it sets out 2 recommendations that the Council needs to ensure that departmental workforce plans are formalised, adopted and implemented across all services. And secondly, the Council must design and embed clear evaluation processes with performance measures into all 5 stages of the process to assure itself that it is proactively considering and responding to workforce planning and service demand. So with those few words, I think the important thing to note is the Council has obviously been on a journey. Lots of benefits have been achieved in the Children's and Family Services, which are beneficial to other services in the Council. That's what's important now is the Council's response to those recommendations and how it's moved forward with workforce planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm looking now. Are there any questions for Bethan? Ah, yes. Oh no, that was Bethan's own hand. Don't worry. Now, I think you've impressed them, Bethan. I think there's. Oh yeah, no, I've got deal with it. Yep, sorry, deal with it.
But I just want to make a little point about on that paragraph 8. That's on page 5. It stated that the turnover in the department decreased by 9% between 2017 and 2020. What you mean, I think, is 9 percentage points. It's actually a 45% improvement.
Yes, I understand what you say. So, yes, the turnover was 20% at the point in 2017, and at 2020 that was at 11%.
Yeah, but that is 45% better. It's 9 percentage points.
Yeah,
but it's 45% better. Just the maths. Sorry.
Thank you.
Mr. Cadeirydd?
Yes, Gwilym.
Chair. I'm not going to argue with Mr. Dilwyn Evans with figures. I'm sure he's more of an expert than I am. But certainly, what has been presented is correct, of course. Going back to 2017, and I think the authority would acknowledge that we did receive a critical report about our children's services at the time. And then the new leader at the time decided that we must address this problem. And the social services or children's services improvement panel was established. And you can see the results in this report. There's been a significant improvement. Of course, historically, and if you look at the situation in a number of authorities, you do have social workers in the children's services who want to progress. They might want a bigger challenge. But the situation on Anglesey was certainly unacceptable at the time. But as I said earlier, things have improved immensely in the social services on Anglesey. And I know that the authority is helping other authorities in Wales now. I remember helping one specific authority in Mid Wales, and I gave them a presentation about what had taken place on Anglesey and what our vision was. And that vision has now been achieved, thankfully. But thank you for the report.
Thank you very much. I can't see anybody else. I think we do. No, Dilwyn's hand is, yes.
I've come back, Chair. Has there been any management response to this report, please?
Well, we have discussed the recommendations with the council and they've accepted the recommendations, but I'm not sure if one of the officers is on this call. Maybe Caris Edwards can explain or give a little insight on the progression, because I am aware from the field work that some of the workforce plans that we've suggested for all the services were being developed and being implemented. So I don't know if there's an update on that, where the council's at with that.
Yeah, Chair, would you like me to come in?
Certainly, please. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, my Bethan and
yes, as Bethan has noted, following discussions with Wales Audit Office, we found the feedback useful, and since the review in February, we have begun a process where workforce planning is discussed in our heads meeting every quarter. That includes the senior team and all heads of service who meet monthly, but every quarter we receive a situation on workforce planning, and by now every service has a plan in place. Some services need to formalise it and provide more details, but we're nearly there. It is a journey, as Bethan said, and it's a journey that's developing. I think the other week we had a meeting with the HR Wales, and we were listening to difficulties across Wales in terms of recruitment. It's not just a problem on Anglesey. So workforce planning is more important than ever. And we have to adapt to the situation. We have to look what the situation is at the time. That is happening. We have a meeting of the Penaethiaid every quarter with HR officers, and they go through the latest staff turnover figures, people who intend to retire and so on. And then that fuels the plan further. So there are more details, but I hope that that gives you the feedback that you require at the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that contribution. Do I have another? I saw Dilwyn's hand move, but I can't. No, I don't think I've got anybody else speaking. I think that concludes it. Thank you very much indeed. And I think it's just for us to accept the recommendations, the two recommendations. One is the workforce plan implementation, the assurance that the workforce plans are living documents. Can I have a proposer for those two recommendations, please?
I propose, Mr. Chair.
Richard, thank you.
I'll second
I've got a
that.
second.
Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, John. So if we could just go around the table. Dylan Rees.
Derbyn, accept.
Alan Roberts. Alan Roberts.
Derbyn, accept.
Yeah. Dilwyn Evans.
Accept. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that thank you very much indeed, Bethan, for that, and also for Keris's contribution as well. I think now we move on to item 10, which is the Audit Wales report and recommendations sent to myself by the audit for Wales, Derwyn Owen. Who is going to? Is there an officer present now that was?
Perhaps quickly back to me, perhaps, Chair, and I see that Gethin is with us, who can steer you on the way forward.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. Yep, that would be terrific. Thank you.
Yep. Diolch yn fawr. Llythyr safonol di hwn di'r...
This is a standard letter sent to all Governance and Audit Committee in Wales. So it isn't specifically for Anglesey alone. And what has become apparent is that there are a number of layers to Audit Wales work. You have the local work we do. You know, I've become a familiar face to you over the past few years as a result of that. But of course, we have our national studies as well, local government studies and thematic work that we undertake as well. The intention of the letter is just to remind us about the importance for the Audit Committee to consider all the layers of the Audit Wales's work, and also the work of other regulators as well. And what this letter is really just to remind us about the need to establish a procedure for raising awareness about the work of Audit Wales and other regulators as well. It is something that Gethin Morgan and I have been trying to develop. Audit Wales and the senior leadership team have been trying to develop this together. So over to Gethin to tell you about the way forward.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Alan. Just to assure you, as a committee, we have acknowledged as a result of receiving the letter that there are national reviews and local reviews that exist and that are submitted every year. And in collaboration with Audit Wales, what we've been able to do is to go back to a specific date in 2019 to identify all the national reviews that have taken place since then. And work is progressing at the moment to give you an annual update as a committee about our response as an organisation to all these national reviews since 2019. So we're working towards bringing you that update in December, if that's okay with you. In addition to that, what we've also done is to try to formalise the process and the way of tracking local recommendations. And we've just had the discussion on two of them with workforce planning. So using the 4-action tracking system, which is currently used to manage audits and to ensure that action is taken on our own internal audits, which is led by the internal audit team. So that's the current situation. We intend to bring you some sort of report by December that addresses the points that I've just highlighted, and to show you what is being done against the different reviews.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Do I have anybody? I can't see any hands moving anywhere. No, I think we it needs to vote. No, thank you very much indeed for your contributions. I think that I need somebody to propose the motion that we accept this letter of the Audit Wales reports on their recommendations, and I'm looking for a proposer.
Happy to propose, Mr. Chairman. Alan Roberts.
Alan Roberts is proposing it, and I want a seconder.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
And Richard is going to second it. Thank you very much indeed. If I can just quickly go around. That's Dylan Rees again.
Yeah, Deborah Clifford.
Yes, I accept the letter.
Thank you. Gwilym.
Accept.
Richard Griffiths. No, I've got wrong, have I? It should be Alan Roberts. Is it Richard Griffiths you didn't support?
You say your name, I did it.
Yes.
I seconded.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. It's Alan Roberts that I missed out.
I propose, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Dilwyn Evans.
Accepted.
Thank you very much indeed.
John Griffith also accepts.
Oh, thank you, John. How could I miss you? Thank you very much. Yeah, so we move on now to item 10, which is the internal audit update. And I'm not sure who is going to.
Thank you, Chair. That's me.
I wondered where you were.
Keeping a low profile.
Well done. Thank you very much.
So this is your usual report that updates you on the work that we've done since we last reported. It's quite a brief period since we last reported, about a 5 to 6 week period. I won't hang about because it's already been a very long meeting, so I'm mindful that you'd want me to get through this as quickly as possible. So I'll do a whistle stop tour. So in that short period there, we've finalised 2 reports, the first being housing allocations and the second being a follow-up. The first housing allocations was an audit that the executive asked us to look at. They were concerned about poor performance in the area specifically of reletting void properties, and asked us to look at the performance indicator to see if that performance indicator was appropriate or there was in fact a problem in the service. We therefore chose the following key question as our marker. Does the council have adequate arrangements in place to ensure that processes for managing empty or void properties and reletting them to new tenants are both economic and efficient to maximise rental income and effective to ensure the properties are let to the right tenant and meet the required quality standards? Our review concluded overall that yes, we could give reasonable assurance that this was being met. Specifically with regards to the appropriateness of the performance measure, what we found is that the housing service over the years has changed its vision for its housing stock. It aims to get the right tenant into the right property at the right time. And it's revised its approach in terms of sensitive lettings policies as well as community and parish connection requirements, and this is all to support their overall ambition to improve community cohesion, increase sustainability of tenancies, and consequently reduce the overall number of void properties. As you can see, this will not align with how quickly you can relet a void property. All these are going to take a long time to get the right tenant in the right property at the right time. So the actual performance measure doesn't reflect the vision of the service. And so that's why the poor performance was being seen. So we advised the service to relook at their performance measure in that area, so that it does align with the vision for the service in their allocation of housing. We also highlighted there was an absence of a performance measure to highlight the council's ambitious target for purchasing, renovating and letting former council properties with a view to increasing its housing stock and the provision of social housing options on the Isle of Anglesey. So we recommended that the service look at a performance measure that would actually demonstrate their performance in that area. So we raised 6 risks, which we agreed with management, and we've together developed an action plan for addressing those risks, and that's included in a separate document to housing. You will have seen that the full report to this would have been attached to your pack. Does anybody have any questions on housing allocations before I move on? Chair Dylan Rees Councillor Rees has his hand up.
That's right, excellent.
Thank you, Marion. Yes, I've read the attached report. I've got a follow-up question as well, but first of all, in relation to the attached report, just picking out one of the things it said was the inability of the council's housing management system, namely Orchard, to perform some aspects of the void process, and has resulted in the service adopting and operating separate processes and systems concurrently, causing inefficiency and duplication. So are we going to be able to upgrade the software in the Orchard system to sort of be able to sort of resolve that issue, or can't we resolve it? What is the position?
I think it's been a long-standing issue with the housing management system, Orchard. They are working on adapting it to best suit their needs or to be fit for purpose. But I think that particular issue, I don't think there's much they can do about it. I don't know, Ned Michael, the head of housing, is actually on the call. I don't know if he wants to add anything to that or contradict me.
Ie, pnawn da. Mae wir I ddeud yndi, mae gyda ni system.
Good afternoon. It's true to say, yes, we do have a Orchard information system for managing housing, and we have been investing significantly over the last few months upgrading that system, and we do have a new system coming into place in the beginning of October now to try and make the process easier. But it's very difficult to get all the systems and the support really as well from the IT, small department, the IT department has in the council. We have to battle for that attention as well. So thank you for that response. I've got one other question, Marion, if that's okay. I don't want to raise more points that are in the reports that you've made reference to already. You've pointed out that there are other issues and that there's an action plan that has been agreed to. The action plan wasn't attached, and I'm not sure if that's an error or we're not supposed to see the action plan. It was only the report itself that I could see, but not the action plan.
That's correct, Councillor Rees. The action plan is only shared with management. When it's a reasonable assurance, it's just shared with the head of service and management as an operational plan. The only time we would bring an action plan to the audit committee is when it's a limited assurance, and you would need the assurance that there is an action plan and the things that are being done to address those issues and risks. When it's reasonable assurance, we don't think it's a good use of your time to trawl through an action plan.
Thank you very much. I've got one more hand up, and that is Dilwyn.
I just want to ask Marion, looking at these two updates, where they both shifted from what was limited assurance now to reasonable assurance. And when I look at the levers process, where there are no major risks, and the housing allocations when there are 3, as well as 3 moderate, why has that now become reasonable assurance? To me, it looks like limited still.
If I can draw your attention to paragraph 9, and that says, while they pose a risk to the service's ability to meet its performance targets in the area, we are satisfied they are containable at service level. So it's only if we think that needs a wider either referral to SLT, to the senior leadership team, or it's a cross council issue that we would put it as a limited assurance. So in terms of that in itself, it wouldn't have a significant enough impact on the council as a whole. So therefore, that's why it's got a reasonable assurance. It's not a scientific, I think we've had this conversations many times in the past. It's not a scientific issue. So it's not about numbers, it's about the issues, and it's a qualitative assessment rather than a quantitative assessment.
Yeah, thank you. But does it now appear that the orchard system is not fit for purpose and there should be a search for an alternative set of the software?
I think the head of housing did mention that it's later on in the year. I think they are moving to a new system. I think we have had problems for a number of years with Orchard, and there's had to be significant workarounds to make it work. They do have a project to look at that, and I think, as Ned said, they'll be moving at the end of the year.
Thank you.
Can I just add mewn yn fan'na?
Can I just come in on that? Sorry, in case we create any misrepresentation, Orchard does include all of our activities as the housing department, from the lettings to management of estates. There's no intention at all to move away from Orchard in its entirety, but what we are doing is we are buying an additional module which will enable us to put a better process on the arrangements of the void housing where they become empty. So it's that element we are progressing, not moving away from Orchard in its entirety. It's a particular module.
Thank you.
Is that? I don't think there's any other hands up. And
I'll move on then, Chair. So the next report we completed in the period was the levers process, and it's as per the protocol we have. Where we've only given a limited assurance for the area, we will do a formal follow-up in its entirety of all the recommendations. We are pleased to report that one of the major issue that we raised has now been addressed and successfully addressed. So we're quite happy that the three moderates that are remaining are work in progress, and so we've been able to give a reasonable assurance for that area now. If there are no questions on the levers process, I'll carry on. Yep.
I can't show no hands up. I think you can carry on. Thank you very much.
So very quickly, Chair, the next table there on page 5 of my report shows the 5 areas that are currently in progress. They're specific audits that are on go. Underneath there, you'll see that we're also involved in 3 complex investigations, and as you can imagine, that does take an awful lot of resource. So we're working on those. We're also working on the National Fraud Initiative. And these matches from the National Fraud Initiative were released in January 2021, and you can see there at paragraph 18 a list of the reports that we're currently working on. I think they're fairly self-explanatory. So the payroll to payroll is where we have somebody on our payroll is also appearing on another council's payroll. It could be that the person is working 2 jobs, but the main issue that we look at there is that if the person is on sick leave with us or another organisation, that they're not working for us at the same time. Payroll to Companies House. So this identifies any undeclared declarations of interest. So where we have staff that haven't declared that they have organised businesses, and maybe we are procuring from those businesses and those staff haven't declared those interests. Payroll to creditors is a similar thing where our staff are receiving payments in terms of creditors. So it could be organisations, businesses that we are procuring goods or work or services from. The deceased persons to blue badges is where we've had notification that people still have a blue badge but are unfortunately deceased. and so we work to cancel those badges and inform the blue badge service that they should be cancelled. And the housing tenants waiting list, this is where people appear on more than one council's waiting list, but with different addresses. So this could be suggesting that there is a change of circumstances that hasn't been disclosed, or that false information has been provided when they've asked to go on the waiting list. So they're the 5 matches. We'll report this in the outcome of these investigations next year when we've done all the match checking. Outstanding actions is coming to you as a separate detailed report this time. At Appendix 1, you can see the dashboard, and it's notable there are currently no overdue actions. So it's a really pleasing situation to be in. There are 31 actions due at the end of September, so in 9 days' time. And there's a great deal of work going on at the moment to work with services to make sure that those issues and risks are addressed. Nanette will be going through that detailed report with you straight after my report. So finally, that leads me on to our priorities for 2021-22. And as you'll see, under our current capacity, we are recruiting for 1 member of staff. The closing date was yesterday. I can report that we have had some applications. We'll be looking at them this week to assess the candidates' appropriateness, and we'll be going forward to hopefully interview and be able to recruit from the applications we've had. In the meantime, we're using the money from the vacancies towards funding the IT audit programme. So we're able to buy in some specialist expertise audit work to bring us assurance, and some other specific pieces of work that I've managed to outsource. Our short to medium term priorities are that we will look at the new red and amber residual risks that are on the risk register, the corporate risk register. And there are 6 risks that we haven't looked at in over 2 years. So we'll be focusing on those as well. And we'll also be actively promoting the addressing of the outstanding internal audit issues and risks. As I mentioned, there's 30 odd, which is about half of what we've got are due for implementation at the end of September. So there's a lot of work to do there. In the longer term, a review of the management of fraud risk last year identified some work that we needed to do, and there were 3 actions there. So I'm hoping that they will be addressed in the long term by the end of this financial year anyway. The dashboard, so it's very, very, very small, the Appendix 1, the outstanding action dashboard. You can zoom in and it will be a little bit clearer, but as I said, Nanette will be discussing this in more detail with you in the next item. If you have any questions, Chair, that concludes my item. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. I've got one hand up at the moment, and that is Dylwyn.
I just think that on page 5, to have a heading National Fraud Initiative is not for us to read, but more the fraudsters. Isn't it the National Counter Fraud Initiative?
No, it is actually the National Fraud Initiative. It's the NFI. It's referred to. It's the organisation is called the National Fraud Initiative. It trips off the tongue a little bit easier than NCFI, I suppose. NFI.
The message sounds wrong. Thank you.
I can't see anybody else's hand up. I think that could well conclude that. Thank you very much indeed, Marion.
Thank you.
I need now a proposer that the Governance and Audit Committee notes internal audits assurance provisions and the priorities going forward.
Dylan Rees, I propose, Chair. Cynnig.
Thank you, Dylan.
I'll second.
That's Gwilym.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, we'll just go around the table. It's John Griffiths.
Erbyn, accept.
Alan Roberts.
Erbyn, accept.
Richard Griffiths.
Derbyn, Mr Gadeirydd.
And Dilwyn, please.
Accept. Thank you.
Diolch pawb.
Thank you very much indeed. So I think we go on now to item 10, which is the internal audit update. And this again is going to be led by...
This is Nanette, Chair.
Nanette
Williams, the Principal Auditor.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. This is the second detailed report that we've brought to the committee, which shows the Council's performance in addressing the issues and risks that we identified during our audit work. If you remember back to the April meeting, you requested that a detailed report like this be brought twice a year. So this is in effect the mid-year update, the second one. Overall, it is a positive report. It shows that services are working hard to address the issues and risks that are identified during our work, as Marion mentioned earlier. You'll be aware that we use the 4Action action tracking system to record, monitor and track issues and risks that we raise during our work to make sure that management address them as agreed. And you'll be familiar with the dashboard that we use, as Marion shares it within her update reports. And this really, since the upgrade that we had on the 4Action system, enables us to effectively track actions very quickly when they become due. So if I can just draw your attention to page 2 of the report, current performance. There are 6 graphs included here which show how well the Council is performing in addressing issues and risks that are raised during our audits, as at the end of August. It's worth noting that currently there are no red rated issues or risks outstanding and none that have been raised during the year, which is good news. So at the 31st of August, we're tracking a total of 56 outstanding actions in the system. And you can see in there in graph 1 that of these, 19 are classified as major or amber, and 37 are yellow or moderate in risk priority. As Marion mentioned earlier, you'll see there from graph 2 that there aren't currently any overdue actions. Again, a really good position to be in, but this does change regularly, and at the end of September there will be a large number coming due. But this part of the dashboard really does enable us to actively monitor actions when they become due. So we are really kind of sort of on top of this to make sure that management have addressed the issue or risk. If we just move on then to the next page, to page 3, the following graphs show the current status of actions in the system. So whether they are not started, in progress, complete, and verified by ourselves. You'll remember from the last time we brought this report that the performance here is broken down firstly into all actions, so that's irrespective of the date management agreed to implement them. So that's graph 3 there. And then where they have reached their agreed completion date, so only those actions that have reached the date management agreed to complete them in graph 4 there. So in graph 3, the red portion of not started actions, they relate to issues raised during 2 audits. The first payments supply maintenance and the second corporate parenting panel. But all of these are actions that haven't reached their due date yet. So it's likely that work is well underway in addressing them, but we haven't had an update yet from management because they're not due. In graph 4, again, like I said, this only includes the actions that have reached their agreed completion date, and this shows that where due, 100% have been addressed. We've been able to verify virtually all of these to make sure that we're happy that the action taken actually addresses the original risk raised. So we do a quality assurance on that to make sure that we're happy with what's been done. There are a small number in there, you can see in the green portion of graph 4, that haven't been verified yet. These relate to an audit of payment supply maintenance, which we are scheduled to formally follow up in January. So as part of that work, we'll carry out that check, that verification, to make sure that we're happy with the actions taken. It is important to note here, included in the paragraph 11 there, that we do sometimes extend target dates on occasions, but this is only when the service can demonstrate a legitimate reason for the extension. And certainly this year, with services, particularly frontline services, still responding to the pandemic and the impact that that's had, we have extended several target dates during that time. If I can just take you on to page 4 of the report, the first graph 5 shows the breakdown of actions in terms of when they were originally identified, so the year that the original audit took place. And you can see that the majority of outstanding actions do relate to the last couple of financial years, but there is one dating back to 2016-17. This relates to the need for services to provide assurance that their procurement activity is effective as part of the annual service challenge process. And we have been assured by management that this will be addressed in time for the next service challenge process in November. And this one's quite tricky really, because there is a relatively sort of narrow window to address this. And if that for whatever reason is missed, we have to wait another year in order to do that. But hopefully that will be addressed shortly. It was raised when we last brought this report to the committee that it would be useful for you to see the age of actions in the context of their risk priority, so whether they are amber, yellow, etc. So in graph 6 there, this shows which year all the amber or major rated actions relate to. And you can see that they are much more recent, so we haven't got the old ones in there that are amber, and they date back no further than the 1920 financial year. And I think this demonstrates that management are prioritising addressing the higher risk actions that we raise. And this is also shown in Appendix 1, which gives a detailed update of all the outstanding amber or major related actions. And again, you can see there that they are from more recent audits. Ultimately, though, we do endeavour to pursue all outstanding actions to make sure that they are completed and action's been taken and management have addressed them. Appendix 1 is, as I've said, a detailed update for all the major or amber rated issue risks that we are currently tracking that have yet to be completed. I won't go through this in any great detail, but just to say really that within the current status, for a lot of them it shows the percentage that the action is complete. In many cases, you know, it is sort of 80-90%, and so I think this just shows again that work is well underway in addressing these major rated issues and risks. That's what I wanted to say really, so I'm happy to take any questions that you've got on the report.
Thank you very much. Right. I can't see any hands up at the moment. I take it there isn't any questions. That sounds like you've given a very good report if you've got no questions to be challenged.
The last slot of the day.
No, you haven't. We've got another one. We're all right. Oh, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I think we will now take a vote on the recommendations. The Governance and Audit Committee notes the Council's progress in addressing the outstanding internal audit issue risks. And the other one is to determine whether the level of detail included in the report meets its assurance needs in this area.
Yeah, so sorry to just chip in there. The last time we brought this to you in April, there was a couple of additions. I've added in a couple of tables in there. So it's just really if this is sufficient. I've added in the more detailed update as well, if the committee feels that this is sufficient, or if there's anything else that they feel would be beneficial to the report. It was really just getting that input really from yourselves if possible.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Can I have a proposer on that, or is there anybody wanted to question it?
Dylan Rees, I propose that we accept the report, and we also agree that the detail in the reports meet our assurance needs.
Well done. Thank you very much indeed. I need a seconder.
Happy to second that, Mr. Chairman. Alan Roberts.
Thank you very much indeed, Alan. I will just go around quickly, and that's John Griffiths.
Derbyn yr argymhellion, accept the recommendations.
Dylan Rees second proposes, didn't he? Alan Roberts. Oh no, Alan Roberts. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say. I
Yeah,
did
no,
second
sorry,
it.
sorry.
Chairman.
Yeah, Dylan Rees.
I proposed.
We'll get it right in a second. Gwilym Owen.
Derbyn.
Richard Griffiths.
He sent a message in the chat, Chair, that he had Councillor Griffith had to leave.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. And then is Dilwyn.
Accept.
Yeah. So that concludes that item. Thank you very much indeed. And I think we go on to almost the final item, and that is is it the forward work programme?
Yes, Chair, that's me. It's just you agreed this at your meeting on 25th of May. There were some minor amendments at your next meeting on the 20th of July. There's been an additional meeting added in for the finalised statement of accounts and annual governance statement. So as you can see there's an extra meeting slotted in, and in bold you can see the two new the reports that are going there that have moved. That's all it was, Chair, just for you to
see it.
To note it, yeah, very minor amendments.
Yeah. I think everybody will have seen those now. And I think the Marion has explained they're in the bold type, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. We just need to accept the forward work programme, and I'm going to make particular note of who proposes and who seconded.
I'll propose it.
Oh, good boy, Gwilym. I now need a seconder.
John Griffith, I'll accept. Or a second, rather.
Thank you, John. So, Dylan Rees.
Derbyn, accept.
Alan Roberts.
Derbyn, accept.
Richard is not here. So, and it's just Dilwyn Evans.
Accept. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So that we've now accepted that report. I think we want to deal with one other matter, and I don't know who was going to lead on this. Was this Marion about?
Me again,
yes.
Yeah. I'm really sorry to bring you any other business at such a late time of the day. I just wanted to update the committee on the recruitment of the lay members. You'll be aware that under the Local Government and Elections Wales Act, a third of the audit committee is going to be required to be lay members, and it's going to be required to be chaired by a lay member. I've been part of a task and finish group working with the WLGA to develop an application form and an advert to help, because the whole of Wales will be recruiting at the same time, all 22 authorities. And as you can imagine, there'll be significant extra numbers because the previous Wales measure 2011 only required us to have one lay member in each authority. Now a third of the members will be required to be lay members. So just to update members on the current position, we're hoping that the advert will go live on the 4th of October, or week commencing the 4th of October. The WLGA will be handling the advertisement and promotion of the positions. We've also developed an application form, a generic application form, so that all 22 authorities can use the same application form, and potential candidates can apply for more than one council. As you can imagine, we're fishing from a very small pool of experienced and appropriate candidates for these roles. So it may be that we may have to share some lay members across councils. The Constitution requires the chair and vice chair to recommend to council the appointment of these lay members. So Councillor Rogers and Dilwyn have agreed to be part of that team. We're hoping that we will be doing that towards the end of this calendar year for those independent members to be in place to be agreed by yourselves, I think, in the February audit committee, so that they're in post by the May 2022 deadline. That's all, Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has on the recruitment of the lay members.
All I would say is that, you know, I was obviously, when we had the All Wales chairman's groups, you know, I was aware then, you know, of the short time period of actually getting this. But I'm very grateful to hear today that you are, you know, already, the adverts are all ready to go out, you know, because otherwise you know, we are fraught with some difficulties, you know, if we don't get the applicants. But if you've started to advertise early, perhaps, you know, this will help us. And yeah, we've got to move this forward, because it's, you know, May will soon be here, and we've got to have everything in place to continue it.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, the advert will be placed in Guardian Jobs and other various social media outlets. We are also encouraged to advertise locally, so I'll be in touch with our communications team to see where the best place for us to promote those vacancies as well.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else would like to ask? Anybody? I think you've been very explicit in what you've told us. Anyhow, I can't really see a lot of questions on it, but it is a massive change, and it's, you know, it's going to be an advantageous set up.
Chair and
yes.
Marion, can I just suggest, I noticed that Gareth Williams, the local democracy reporter, had left the meeting about half an hour ago, so he's missed this item, and it would be perhaps worth contacting him for him to report on this issue and sort of publicise the fact that we are looking to recruit additional lay members.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a very good idea. What would you'd recommend our media person to send him? Yeah,
I'll contact Gethin and ask him to send him something.
Yeah, I think that's a very positive way, because we need as much publicity as we can get to draw, you know, these very able people to come and join
us. Apologies, he's still here.
Oh.
Sorry, Gareth.
Oh.
He must have gone for a panhead, I'm sure.
Yeah, all right. Oh, he'll have heard it from the horse's mouth now. Then that's fine. I think we are now going to call the meeting to an end. It's been a long meeting, and I think all of us would like to thank the people who have, you know, all the contributors. The very high standard that we've had, and I think there's been some very good questions and involvement. And it's, you know, thank you very much indeed. It has gone on for a long time, and with that, I'm now going to bring the meeting. I suppose that we always take it all for granted as our committee officer, and Home. Thank you indeed for all your work, what you do as well. So thank you very much indeed, everybody, and we'll see you soon.